Welcome to Life Stories, where one envelope at a family dinner shattered a marriage, exposed a hidden truth, and redefined what it means to fight for dignity. Imagine spending years trying to earn a seat at a table, only to realize the people sitting around it were never rooting for you. She smiled through the jokes. She served the meal. And then she dropped the truth so sharp, so undeniable that it silenced everyone. This is the story of a woman who stopped asking for love and started demanding respect. A story about trust, betrayal, and the quiet strength it takes to stand up not just for yourself, but for the child who deserves better. What happened that night didn't just change her marriage, it changed her. Now, settle in. Because what you're about to hear may leave you questioning where loyalty ends and self-worth begins. The last Saturday of October was supposed to be perfect. Emily Patterson had spent the entire week preparing for her in-laws' annual family dinner, an event she both dreaded and obsessed over. The roast had been marinating since dawn, the dining room gleamed with candles and polished silver, and Noah, her 10-month-old son, had fallen asleep upstairs without a single whimper. Even the playlist humming softly through the Bluetooth speakers was curated to create the illusion of effortless charm. She'd gone through 3 florists to find a bouquet that looked autumnal without being too obvious. It was all part of a performance, a silent audition she had never stopped giving since the day she married Nate. His family had never explicitly said she wasn't good enough, but the message lingered like smoke in the air. Emily wasn't one of them. Too quiet. Too ambitious. Too ordinary. Madison, Nate's younger sister, had once called her a Pinterest pretty, which sounded like a compliment but wasn't. It meant curated, calculated, the kind of woman who tried too hard. But Emily had learned to smile through the comments, to laugh on cue, to pour the wine and bite her tongue. Tonight, she would do it again because that's what wives do. Or so she believed. Until Madison raised her glass and smirked. "Too bad Noah looks nothing like Nate," she said, her voice honeyed with sarcasm. The table stilled for a beat. Then Nate, her husband, her supposed partner, chuckled. That soft, familiar chuckle he always used to fit in. "Maybe Emily's got a secret," he added, eyes flicking toward her, then away just as fast. Laughter rippled around the table like a disease. Lauren covered her mouth, trying to stifle a giggle. Nate's mother, Ellen, raised an eyebrow but said nothing, sipping her wine like it was tea at a royal funeral. Only Tom, Nate's father, remained silent, slicing his roast with mechanical precision. Emily sat frozen, the air knocked clean out of her. She felt it all in slow motion, the burn of humiliation rising from her chest, the wine turning sour on her tongue, the suffocating realization that she was utterly alone at this table of blood relatives and forced smiles. She had braced herself for judgment, but she had not expected betrayal. Because this wasn't just a joke. It was a confirmation. She had seen it before, in Nate's hesitation when holding Noah, in the way he studied the baby's features like a stranger inspecting a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. He'd ask subtle questions, always under the guise of curiosity. "You're sure about the due date, right? Did you say your grandfather had blue eyes? His nose doesn't look like either of ours." She had dismissed them as nerves, the clumsy anxieties of a new father. But tonight had stripped the veil from everything. She rose, heart pounding. No dramatics. No tears. Just a calm she didn't recognize in herself. "I think," she said evenly, reaching for the envelope hidden beneath the runner in the sideboard, "since we're sharing secrets, you should open this." The room fell to ice. Emily placed the envelope in front of Nate. White. Plain. Unmarked but for his name in ink. Nate's smirk faltered. "What is this?" "Go ahead," she said. "Read it out loud." His fingers hesitated before he slid a thumb beneath the flap. The rustle of paper was the only sound in the room now. Madison leaned forward, curiosity crackling in her eyes. Ellen stiffened, wine glass hovering midair. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hold its tick. And then Nate went pale. The header was unmistakable. Bayview Diagnostics, paternity test results. Emily watched him scan the page. Once. Twice. A third time, as though repetition might rewrite reality. She could see the numbers reflected in his eyes, 99.99% probability. No, it was his. Undeniably. Irrefutably. But the truth didn't bring relief. It brought exposure. Because the real secret wasn't in the envelope. It was in the fact that she had felt compelled to get it. And now the whole table knew. "What is this?" Ellen asked, voice clipped and suddenly cold. "I got the test done 3 months ago," Emily said. After Nate made one too many comments about not being sure. "I needed proof. Not for me, I've always known. But because the man I married couldn't look at his own son without seeing a question mark." Nate looked like he'd been slapped. "Emily, She held up a hand. "Don't. Not here. Not after you made me the punchline." The weight of her calmness seemed to silence even Madison. Emily turned, her heels clicking against the floor, each step deliberate as she disappeared into the hallway. Upstairs, the baby monitor glowed softly. Noah slept peacefully, unaware that downstairs, his mother had just detonated the foundation of their family. Downstairs, the air hadn't warmed. Nate still held the paper. Madison stared in silence. And for the first time, Ellen lowered her glass without taking another sip. "What would you have done if your partner publicly humiliated you like that? Do you think trust can ever be fully restored once it's been shattered so deeply?" Because Emily wasn't walking away, she was walking towards something. And when she returned, she wouldn't come back alone. Emily stood at the top of the staircase, staring down at the scene below as if through glass. Her pulse was steady now, no longer racing from rage, but thudding with something colder, deeper. Nate was still at the table, holding the paper like it might burn him. No one had moved. Not even Madison. The room was suspended in a fragile, stunned silence, and Emily felt like a ghost watching her own life fracture beneath her feet. She turned away. In Noah's nursery, the air smelled like lavender and powdered milk. The white noise machine hummed softly beside the crib, a low ocean tide meant to cradle her son through the night. Emily leaned over and placed her hand gently on his chest, rising and falling in the slow rhythm of a child who still trusted the world. She felt a fresh crack open inside her. This wasn't just about the dinner. This was about how many times she had bent herself into silence for the sake of peace. About how often she had let Nate's comments slide, how often she'd swallowed the sting of his family's passive-aggressive digs, how many times she had convinced herself that love meant understanding even when understanding came at the cost of her own dignity. She had thought that envelope would end something. But it had only started it. The next morning, Nate didn't leave for work. Emily found him in the kitchen, still in yesterday's shirt, pouring coffee with a kind of mechanical desperation. He looked like he hadn't slept. Good, she thought. Neither had she. He glanced at her with that boyish guilt he always used when he wanted forgiveness without having to ask for it. "I shouldn't have laughed," he said quietly. "It was a stupid joke." "It wasn't a joke," she replied. "It was a betrayal. And it wasn't the first." He flinched. "Emily, come on. I've been under a lot of pressure. My parents, Madison, they're always. This isn't about them," she cut in. "It's about you. About the fact that you didn't believe me. That you doubted our son, and instead of keeping that doubt private, you turned it into entertainment." Nate ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean to humiliate you." "But you did," she said. And the worst part? You didn't even care until I showed you proof. Silence thickened between them. And then, slowly, she reached into the drawer by the fridge and pulled out a small folder. She placed it on the counter in front of him. "What's this?" he asked, already wary. "Copies of the test. And the receipts. And 3 emails from you to different paternity testing clinics 2 months after Noah was born. I found them last night." Nate's mouth parted, but no words came out. The blood drained from his face. "You were going to do it," Emily said softly. "But you didn't." "Why?" I don't know," he stammered. "I guess. I was afraid of what the answer might be." "But you never asked me," she whispered. "You never said you had doubts. You just carried them like a loaded gun and waited for them to explode." He dropped into a chair, suddenly looking 10 years older. "I didn't want to believe it. But Madison kept saying things. And my mom. She asked once if maybe the baby came early." Emily folded her arms tightly across her chest. "And instead of defending me, you fed the fire." Tears welled in Nate's eyes, but she couldn't bring herself to feel sorry for him. "I was scared," he said. "That you didn't love me the same way I loved you. That maybe you regretted marrying me." Emily stared at him. "So you punished me?" "No. I didn't know how to ask." "And now," she asked, "what do you know now?" Nate looked up at her, his voice barely audible. "That I might have destroyed the only thing that ever truly mattered to me." Emily didn't answer. She picked up the baby monitor and walked out of the kitchen. It wasn't until later that afternoon, after Noah's nap, that she found herself standing in the doorway of her home office. The one room in the house she had claimed for herself, like blue walls, a stack of novels on the shelf, her vision board still pinned with images of a life she thought she was building with Nate. She sat at the desk and opened her laptop. There, in a folder she'd created months ago but never dared open, were legal documents she had once saved just in case. Templates for separation agreements. Instructions for custodial planning. The kind of contingency plan that no bride ever thinks she'll need. But she wasn't that bride anymore. She wasn't even that wife. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A message from her sister popped up. "You okay? Want me to come over?" Emily stared at the screen. Then, without replying, she typed a message of her own. This one was addressed to Bayview Family Law. "Have you ever stayed too long in a relationship out of fear, even when your heart already knew it was over?" Emily was done begging for trust now. She was demanding respect. And the next move would shake everything Nate thought he still had. The divorce papers were never filed. Not because Emily changed her mind, and certainly not because Nate had begged her to stay. It was because she discovered something far more liberating than revenge. She had already left him, long before that envelope hit the dinner table. The moment she stopped shrinking to fit inside his doubts, she had walked out emotionally. The paperwork was just catching up. Weeks passed. Fall began to burn into winter, and with it came a clarity that chilled and warmed in equal measure. They slept in separate rooms. They attended counseling. They co-parented Noah with civility, but no longer with intimacy. And through it all, Emily quietly rebuilt herself from the inside out. It wasn't loud, this transformation. There were no grand declarations or Instagram-worthy glow ups. Just small, defiant acts of autonomy. She took over the family finances. She enrolled in a part-time master's program. She booked herself a solo weekend retreat in upstate New York and left without asking for permission. The more she reclaimed herself, the less she mourned what had been lost. But not everything was resolved in therapy. During their 4th counseling session, the therapist, a soft-voiced woman named Dr. Simmons, looked directly at Nate after a long silence and asked, Can you tell Emily what exactly you were afraid of when you doubted Noah's paternity? Emily's breath caught. Nate shifted, stared at his hands, and when he finally looked up, his eyes were red. I was afraid he was too good to be mine, he said. That maybe I didn't deserve a child that perfect. Or a wife who gave him that kind of love. I thought, if I could find something wrong, I could brace myself for losing it. Emily sat back, stunned. It was not the excuse she expected. It wasn't even an excuse, it was a confession. And somehow, it hurt worse than betrayal. Because it meant Nate hadn't just doubted her, he had doubted himself. Their son had become collateral damage in a war Nate was waging against his own unworthiness. Emily looked at Dr. Simmons. What do you do when love becomes collateral, too? The therapist didn't answer. Some questions weren't meant to be answered in 50-minute blocks. The night before Christmas, Nate asked to take Noah to visit his parents. Emily agreed, even helped pack the overnight bag. She stood in the doorway with her coat still on, watching Nate fumble with the car seat while Noah babbled from the back seat, completely unbothered by his father's awkwardness. He still loves you, you know, Nate said without looking at her. Emily crossed her arms. He doesn't know how not to. That's what terrifies me, Nate whispered. That I'll ruin that someday, too. The headlights blinked on. The car reversed. Emily watched them disappear into the snowy dusk. That night, she poured herself a glass of wine, wrapped herself in a blanket, and pulled out the box she had been avoiding. It held their wedding album, hospital bracelets from Noah's birth, a stack of birthday cards Nate had written her over the years, each filled with words that once felt like promises. She flipped through them slowly. And then she cried, not out of grief, but out of release. It wasn't rage anymore. It wasn't betrayal. It was the slow, steady ache of accepting that some love stories don't survive their own beginnings. When Noah returned the next morning, he toddled into the house with snow still dusting his hat. "Mama," he squealed, running straight to her legs. Emily dropped to her knees and wrapped him in her arms, burying her face in his jacket. He smelled like peppermint and baby shampoo, like peace and purpose and home. And right then, she knew. She would stay. Not for Nate. Not for the marriage. For the life she was building, for the strength she'd uncovered, for the boy who deserved to see what dignity looked like up close. She and Nate wouldn't go back to what they had before. That version of their marriage had expired the night she handed him the envelope. But maybe, just maybe, they could evolve. They sold the house in March. Too many ghosts in those walls. Emily moved into a smaller, sunnier place with white curtains and hardwood floors that echoed with Noah's giggles. Nate rented an apartment nearby. They shared custody. They shared holidays. And sometimes, they even shared coffee, sitting on the front porch in silence while Noah played with sidewalk chalk. There were no grand reconciliations. No second wedding. No montage of healing. Just quiet respect, hard-earned boundaries, and a boy who grew up watching his mother speak truth without fear. One evening in late spring, Emily found a letter in her mailbox. No return address, but she knew the handwriting. It was Madison. Inside was a single page. Emily. I was wrong. I let my own bitterness twist into cruelty. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know, I see it now. I see you. Madison. Emily folded the note. She didn't cry. She didn't frame it. She simply walked to her kitchen, clipped it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower, and returned to dinner preparations. The past didn't need to be forgiven to be left behind. That night, over spaghetti and salad, Noah looked up at her and said, "Mama, are you happy?" Emily smiled, really smiled, the kind that starts in the spine and rises all the way to the cheekbones. "Yes," she said. I think I finally am. What part of Emily's journey resonated with you the most? If you felt this story deeply, comment 100 below. Let us know what country are you watching from. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and thank you for watching Life Stories.